You've heard of the F-16, the F-22, the F-35, but here's something that's going to bother you once you notice it. Where's the F-1? Where's the F-2, the F-7, the F-10? Did America just skip them? Are they classified? Did they blow up? Or is there a whole hidden history of American fighter jets that almost nobody talks about? The answer is yes, and today we're going through all of them. Every single F, from the very first one all the way to the jets flying right now, what each one was built for, how it flew, and what happened to it. Let's go. First, what does the F even stand for? Fighter. That's it. But here's what most people don't know. Before 1947, they didn't call them fighters. They called them pursuit planes. That's why you had the P-51 Mustang, the P-47 Thunderbolt. The P stood for pursuit. When the Air Force became its own branch in 1947, they switched P to F, but the numbering kept going. Then in 1962, everything changed. The Air Force and the Navy had been using completely separate naming systems. Total chaos. The same jet would have two completely different names, depending on who you asked. So the government said enough, they hit Reset 1, unified list. Starting from F-1, that's the list we're going through today. So when the 1962 reset happened, the first numbers, F1 through F11, were mostly handed out to jets that were already flying. Mostly Navy carrier jets that just got renamed. Some were already being retired. They finally got official F numbers for the first time. Think of these as the pioneer generation. No radar missiles, guns only, barely supersonic. The Wright brothers' grandsons. F-1 Fury, America's first swept-wing carrier jet, based on the famous F-86 Sabre from the Korean War, but built to land on aircraft carriers. By the time it got the F-1 name in 1962, it was basically already a museum piece. It flew, it fought, and then it quietly disappeared. Most people have never heard of it. F-2 Banshee, one of the Navy's very first jet fighters. Flew combat in the Korean War. Twin engines, straight wings, guns. By 1962, when it got the F-2 name, it was already retired. Got a number on its way out the door. F-3 Demon. This one mattered. The F-3 was one of the first Navy jets built to carry missiles, not just guns. It had radar. That was new. Problem was, the engine they picked was so unreliable, it was literally killing pilots. They had to redesign the whole thing mid-production. Troubled start, but it pointed the way forward. F-4 Phantom II. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The Navy had this jet called the F-4H. The Air Force had a jet called the F-1010. They were the exact same plane with two different names. The Secretary of Defense found out and basically lost his mind. He forced them both to call it the F-4, and the F-4 Phantom became one of the most famous jets ever built. Could carry 18,000 pounds of bombs or air-to-air missiles. Over 5,000 were built. 11 countries flew it. Here's the crazy part. It was originally designed with no gun at all. The thinking was, missiles are the future, guns are old news. Vietnam proved that wrong very fast. They had to bolt a gun pod onto the outside of the jet. The F-4E fixed that permanently. Quick question, do you think removing the gun from a fighter jet sounds like a good idea? Because in the 1950s, a lot of very smart people thought so. Drop your answer below. F-5 Freedom Fighter, Tiger II, small, cheap, easy to fix. The US government bought hundreds of these, not for America, but to give to allied countries during the Cold War. Simple enough that smaller nations could actually maintain it. F-6 Skyray looked like a flying saucer. Not joking, the Delta wings gave it this weird round shape that looked like nothing else in the sky. Could climb faster than any US jet of its time and broke world records, but it had the range of a sports car on a single tank, almost no radar. Used for one thing only, scramble fast, intercept something close, come back, retired by 1964. F-7, this one is genuinely bizarre. In the early 1950s, the Navy was worried that supersonic jets couldn't land on aircraft carrier decks. The approach speeds were too high. So someone said, what if the jet took off from the ocean itself? Convair built a Delta wing jet with retractable water skis instead of landing gear. The pilot would skim across the ocean surface, pop the skis down, and take off from the water. The F-7 Sea Dart was the result. It was the first and only seaplane to ever break the sound barrier. In 1954, test pilot Charles Richburg pushed it supersonic in a shallow dive. Then 4 months later, he was killed when the aircraft disintegrated at low altitude during a public demonstration. The program was immediately canceled. 5 were built, 3 ever flew. When the 1962 unified naming system came in, one surviving Sea Dart was still technically on the Navy inventory. So it got the F-7 designation almost by accident, right before being struck off the books that same year. F-8 Crusader, they called it the last of the gunfighters. The F-8 was the last American jet where the gun was the main weapon. Not missiles, not bombs, just guns and a pilot who knew how to use them. In Vietnam, the F-8 had a kill ratio of 19-3 against enemy MiGs, 19 kills, 3 losses. That's an insane number. It also had one of the coolest features in aviation history. The wing could physically tilt upward by 7 degrees during landing to slow the jet down. On a carrier deck, a variable incidence wing, wild engineering, France flew it until 1999, F-9 Cougar. By the time it got the F-9 name, it wasn't really a combat jet anymore, more of a trainer. But it was an important step, swept wings on a carrier jet, proving the design worked before faster jets came along. F-10 Skyknight. Big, slow, ugly. But it was America's first radar-equipped night fighter jet, and it was terrifying in the dark. In Korea, it shot down more enemy aircraft at night than any other jet. Nobody wanted to mess with it after dark. Later spent its life as an electronic warfare aircraft jamming enemy radar. Not glamorous, absolutely lethal. F-11 Tiger. The F-11 Tiger is famous for exactly one reason. In 1956, a pilot fired the Tiger's cannon, kept flying, and flew into his own bullets. The jet's curved flight path caught up to the shells it had just fired. The aircraft shot itself down. This actually happened. The pilot survived. Other than that, it had a short career quickly replaced by faster jets. The Blue Angels flew it for a while, and that was mostly it. F-12 Blackbird. Why F-12? Imagine a missile with a cockpit. Mach 3.2, over 80,000 feet altitude. The YF-12 was the interceptor version of the SR-71 Blackbird, built to chase down Soviet bombers at speeds nothing could touch. 3 were built, they set world records that stood for decades, but by the time they were ready, the threat had changed. The Soviets weren't coming with bombers anymore, they were coming with nuclear missiles. You can't shoot those down with a fighter jet. So the program was canceled, 3 prototypes exist, that's all that will ever exist. F-13, never assigned, skipped on purpose. The number 13 was considered unlucky, and Grumman, who would have received it, flat out refused. So the most powerful military in the world skipped a number because it seemed bad luck. The next jet became the F-14. Pause here, let that land. The US military, scared of the number 13, great place for a comedic beat or B-roll of someone knocking on wood. Vietnam changed everything. America sent jets loaded with missiles into the sky and then found themselves in close turning dogfights with nimble Soviet-built MiGs. The missiles didn't always work. The jets weren't maneuverable enough, the kill ratios were embarrassing, so they went back to the drawing board. What came next were the jets people actually put on their bedroom walls. F-14 Tomcat. The F-14 had wings that physically swept back in flight, wide for low speed, swept for Mach 2.34. It carried the AIM-54 Phoenix missile, which could hit a target 100 miles away. The radar could track 24 targets at once and engage 6 simultaneously. It was retired by the US Navy in 2006, but here's something wild. Iran still has them. The Shah bought F-14s from America in the 1970s. After the revolution, the US cut off all parts and support. Iran has kept them flying by cannibalizing their own fleet for spare parts for nearly 50 years. That is how good this jet is. F-15 Eagle 1 stat, that's all you need. 104 kills, 0 air-to-air losses. Ever. In 50 plus years of combat, no F-15 has ever been shot down by another aircraft. Not one. It flies at Mach 2.5. Its engines are so powerful, it can point straight up and climb like a rocket. It entered service in 1976 and is still being built right now. The brand new F-15EX Eagle II is in production in 2025. Some jets age. The F-15 just keeps getting better, and it's still in use against Iran. This was the same plane that was shot down in Iran. Still in service and production. Quick question. If you had to pick one jet to fly into a real dogfight, which one would it be, F-14 Tomcat or F-15? Answer below. F-16 Fighting Falcon. Most produced Western jet. Here's something wild about the F-16. It was intentionally designed to be aerodynamically unstable. Left alone, it would crash. A computer fires 40 times per second to keep it in the air, making tiny adjustments the pilot's hands never could. That instability is actually what makes it so insanely agile. Single engine, cheaper than the F-15, could do almost everything. Dogfight, bomb targets, sink ships, over 4,600 built, 25 plus countries fly it still in production today. The most produced Western fighter jet in history. Pilots call it the Viper, not the Fighting Falcon, the Viper. Northrop YF-17 Cobra. In 1972, the Air Force ran a competition for a cheap, lightweight fighter to work alongside the expensive F-15. 2 companies competed, General Dynamics with the YF-16 and Northrop with the YF-17 Cobra. The YF-17 was remarkable. Twin engines, incredibly agile. It could fly supersonic without afterburner, a feat called supercruise. The test pilot after his first flight said, When our designers said they were giving the airplane back to the pilot, they meant it. It's a fighter pilot's fighter. The Air Force chose the F-16. The YF-17 lost, end of story, or so it seemed. Then Congress told the Navy, pick one of those two jets for your carriers. The Navy looked at the single-engine F-16 and said, no thanks, too risky over ocean. They took the twin-engine YF-17, enlarged it, added carrier equipment, and it became the F-18 Hornet. The jet that lost became the Navy's most important aircraft. The F-17 number was never officially used in production, but its DNA is in every F-18 flying today. F-18 Hornet and Super Hornet. The Navy had a problem. The F-14 was incredible, but expensive. They needed one jet that could both fight other jets and bomb ground targets. The Hornet was the answer. The upgraded version, the FA-18E/F Super Hornet, is bigger, flies farther, carries more. When the F-14 retired in 2006, the Super Hornet took over everything fleet defense, strike missions, reconnaissance. The Blue Angels still fly the Hornet. Not the most glamorous jet, but it never breaks down. And in the Navy, reliability is everything. F-19 officially never assigned. But in the 1980s, toy companies sold model kits of a fake F-19 stealth fighter, and it looked strangely close to what the real secret jet turned out to be. Many believe F-19 was held in reserve for a classified program. The real secret jet got a very different number on purpose. F-20 Tiger Shark, this one is heartbreaking. Northrop built the F-20 as a cheaper, better alternative to the F-16. It was faster to start than most jets of its time, from cold start to supersonic in 60 seconds. Chuck Yeager, the man who broke the sound barrier, called it the finest fighter available, but the US government kept pushing F-16s to every country that wanted a jet. Nobody would buy a fighter that America itself didn't fly. 3 F-20s were built. 2 crashed at air shows, program canceled. One of the greatest jets nobody ever flew in combat. Between F-20 and F-22, the numbers get quiet. Very quiet. We know designations like F-112 through F-16 were secretly assigned, some to Soviet aircraft the US captured and tested in secret, others to classified experimental programs. What exactly? Still not fully confirmed, but one jet did get an out-of-sequence number on purpose. F-21, this one is wild. The F-21 isn't an American design at all. It's an Israeli fighter jet, the IAI Kafir, that the US Navy leased from Israel in the 1980s for one specific purpose: to pretend to be a MiG. The Navy needed to train its pilots to fight Soviet MiG-21s and MiG-23s. Here's the crazy fact. In 2019, India and the Soviet made MiG-21 and Su-30 was shot down by Pakistan F-16 and JF-17. Pilot was captured by Pakistan Air Force.
The officers of the Pakistani army have looked after me very well. They are thorough gentlemen.
Which aircraft you were flying?
I'm sorry, Major. I'm not supposed to tell you this, but I'm sure you found the wreckage.
India claimed it shot down a Pakistani F-16. When such claims are made, they are usually checked by verifying the aircraft inventory, including the F-16s Pakistan purchased from the USA. A US official counted the Pakistan Air Force's jets and confirmed that none were missing. Let's get back to the video. The Kafir had a similar performance envelope. Fast, agile delta wing. So the Navy leased a squadron of them, gave them the F-21A designation to bring them into the official system, and sent them up against US Navy pilots in training exercises. This is called dissimilar air combat training, fighting a jet that handles completely differently from your own so you don't develop bad habits. The F-21 was returned to Israel by 1989, its job done. A foreign jet with an American number used to simulate America's biggest enemy. F-117 Nighthawk. Here's the thing about the F-117. It's not actually a fighter. It carries bombs. It has no air-to-air radar. It can't dogfight. Technically, it's a bomber, but the Air Force called it a fighter for 2 reasons: secrecy and because fighter attracted better pilots. The number 117 was picked specifically to confuse the Soviets. It's completely out of sequence. The plane was classified for years. When it finally appeared publicly in 1988, people couldn't believe what they were looking at. Nothing had ever looked like this. Gulf War, 1991. It flew into the most heavily defended airspace on Earth and came back without a scratch. Retired 2008. Then, in 1999, a Serbian military unit shot one down using a modified old Soviet missile system by detecting its landing gear door opening. One small gap in stealth. That's all it took? Everything up to this point? Radar could see it. Fast, deadly, incredible, but visible. The next generation changed the game. These jets don't just fly fast, they disappear. F-22 Raptor on radar, the F-22 looks like a marble, a literal marble-sized object moving at Mach 1.8 without afterburner. That's called supercruise, supersonic without burning extra fuel, without the heat signature that makes jets easy to detect. The engines can also physically aim their thrust, called thrust vectoring, letting the jet turn at angles that seem physically impossible. Pilots from other countries who have trained against it in exercises say the same thing. By the time you see it, you're already dead. Only 187 were ever built. The program was cut short because it cost too much. No country can export it. It's too secret. And right now, no jet on Earth can beat it in the air. F-23. In the late 1980s, the Air Force ran a competition for the next stealth fighter. Northrop built the YF-23, nicknamed Black Widow II, a diamond-shaped, alien-looking jet that was faster and stealthier than anything flying. The second prototype, the Grey Ghost, reached Mach 1.6 without afterburner. By every technical measure, many engineers argue the YF-23 was better than the YF-22. Faster, stealthier, longer range, higher ceiling. Even the program manager of the losing team said, "We knew the numbers. There's no reason we should have lost." But the YF-22 was more agile at low speed, and Lockheed's team fired actual test missiles during the fly-off, showing the Air Force it was combat ready, not just a prototype. The YF-23 flew conservatively, Northrop lost, the YF-22 became the F-22 Raptor, 2 YF-23s were built and put in museums. And here's an interesting footnote. The Navy's upcoming F/A-XX stealth carrier fighter, designed right now, looks remarkably like the YF-23. The jet lost in 1991. Its design might finally fly in the 2030s, from F-24 to F-34. Here's the thing about F-24 through F-34. Most of those numbers were consumed by the Joint Strike Fighter competition of the 1990s. Multiple companies submitted designs. Boeing's entry was the X-32. Lockheed Martin's was the X-35. These were given experimental X designations during the competition rather than production F numbers. When Lockheed won, instead of giving the winner the next available production number, which would have been around F-24, the military kept the X-35's number and called it the F-35. This is the reason the jump from F-23 to F-35 exists. F-24 through F-34 are effectively ghost numbers, consumed by competition proposals, used temporarily for classified projects, or simply skipped because the designation system doesn't require every number to be used. The military doesn't have to fill in the gaps. If Boeing had won, we'd probably be flying the F-32 today instead. F-35 Lightning II, the F-35 is the most expensive weapons program in human history. $1.7 trillion. Across its full lifetime, that number is so big, it barely feels real. 3 versions, F-35A for the Air Force with normal takeoff, F-35B for the Marines, which can take off in a short distance and land vertically, like a helicopter but a supersonic fighter jet, and the F-35C for the Navy, built for aircraft carriers. It's not faster than the F-22, not as agile, but it does everything: stealth strike, electronic warfare, reconnaissance, air combat, and it shares data in real time with every other F-35 in the sky. 15 plus countries fly it, so they all see the same battlefield picture at once. 8.3 in service by 2025. As of right now, April 2026, F-35s have been used in real combat operations. It's not theoretical anymore.